Leeds, Leeds, Leeds. What is happening? Welcome to Working Hours, an oral history podcast about a place called Leeds, a time called now, and an activity called work. Working Hours wants to record 1,000 loiners over the course of this, the most important decade in the history of the human species, and ask them about what they do all day and hear how they feel about it. My name is Simon, and this is all my fault. My mission here is to try to map out what my city, Leeds, a city that has declared a climate emergency, did during humanity's biggest emergency. On Working Hours, we hear how loiners have, are, and will be coping with our multiple and expanding crises during their day-to-day working hours. Can we turn things around? We'll find out. To tell this story, I need loiners like you, dear listener. I need people in Leeds or people from Leeds to come on this podcast and just tell me what they do all day and let me record how this affects us. Thank you for listening.
What did you want to be when you grew up?
So this one automatically stumped me actually, because it got me thinking about, so yes, what did I want to be when I grew up? Originally was something like a lawyer or, a doctor or all of the kind of generic kind of roles that were taught about when we were at school. And I think it probably was a lawyer, and that was what I wanted to be for as far back as I can remember. But yeah, it was really interesting to me to think about actually the roles that you're kind of taught when you're at school, which is not reflective of like the real world whatsoever. But yeah, I think it was something like law, or I was always convinced that I was going to, do my exams, go to university and do something kind of studious like that.
Yeah. I mean, so I've mentioned sort of influence of TV and movies and stuff on kind of our perception of work. There was a lot of shows in the 80s and 90s and stuff that were like law, medicine, cops, like professions. It's very profession oriented.
You're listening to Series 5, Episode 16, and to my guest, Danielle Heward. This is another Squadcast interview recorded on the 9th of May, 2024. Hello, listener. Yes, I said Episode 16. The last one was a bonus episode because of the copyright implications. So this one is a proper episode. Before we start, I just want to say that people are people. We are one species. The press whips up hatred in this country to sow division while the rich rifle through our pockets and then scapegoat other people. This has always happened. If you don't know what the Allport scale is, go and look it up right now. What's different here in this moment is that global civilization is in freefall collapse, and this version that we have can't actually be supported by the ecosystem from whence it came, because that ecosystem doesn't exist anymore, which is why nothing is going to get better within this economic arrangement, and why it unfortunately has little to nothing to offer you or anyone else in the short term, and even less in the medium term. Their offer to you is vote against commies or the fash. They don't offer anything, and they deliver even less. This fuck you attitude to the domestic population is quite literally lethal to us and our loved ones. The hostile London press and government attitude to the public, which has been a consistent theme across successive governments across this millennium, ever since the invasion of Iraq was launched, based on lies by oil companies, for oil companies and private military contractors and arms dealers. Oil, the thing that they make the microplastics what are in your bloodstream out of. Oil, the very thing that has us involved with the Middle East and the very thing that is cooking and drowning us out of life and livelihood now, today. I'm proud of Leeds for seeing off violent, racist morons at the weekend, but those useful idiots of capital, those sadistic, violent, dangerous, murderous and destructive men and boys will be back, and they need to be resisted every time they show up. By us. The state won't show up for us. You should know this by now. I'm going to stop there. If you want to see the rant I cut out of this intro, then go to the news section of Western Studios Leeds website. Please remember that unless otherwise directly stated in an episode, my guests haven't seen, approved or endorsed anything I've ever said on any of my intros or outros. This is all my fault, remember. Me, I did it with a microphone in the bedroom. Okay then, let's crack on. Danielle Heward is the owner of Optimo, an operations consultancy dedicated to having a positive impact on people and the planet. Disheartened by the damage done by mainstream business, Danielle set about creating a company that would promote positive change by elevating those organisations making a genuine difference in the world, and has been growing the Optimo team since lockdown, including having her wife join as co-director in January 2023. Having moved to Leeds in 2016 from Birmingham, Danielle has been inspired by the local Leeds business community. She has enjoyed building her business within that context and is excited to continue this journey. Right, let's do this. Episode 126 of Working Hours with Danielle Heward.
I'm going to jump straight into what are you doing now then?
Yeah, so I'll tell you what I do now and kind of a bit about how I got there as well, because I've done a couple of different things. But what I do now essentially is run a small consultancy company. So we're operational improvement consultants. So that means we help other businesses to improve the way that they do things operationally. So that's kind of systems, processes, people, productivity, KPIs, all of that sort of stuff. And I did work for consultancy companies for the majority of my career, but actually kind of got into that totally accidentally because started in hospitality. So I worked in a hotel as one of my very first jobs. And eventually when I realised how much money you don't get paid when you work in a hotel, I became a receptionist then for a management consultancy company, kind of managing their meeting rooms and things. And that was how I kind of started my journey into the consulting world. And again, this is one of those funny things because I, would have had absolutely no idea what a management consultant was when I was at school, but have ended up kind of creating my own business out of it.
So how did that happen? I mean, it would normally be how did you get into it, but so how did the business from that come about? So
yeah,
I suppose there's a little bit of the journey into being a consultant, and then there's a point at which you're like, I could do this for myself.
Yeah. So that actually has been something that I knew I was going to do for ages. So I am sure there's lots of people that will vouch for this, not very good at doing what other people tell me to do unless I agree with it, understand it. I can't just do what someone else tells me to do just for the sake of it. So I've always kind of known, I was probably as young as 2021 when I first discovered or realised that running my own business and doing my own thing was absolutely what I was made to do. And actually, there were loads of ideas that I had before I kind of came up with what is now the business that I run. So I was gonna do a mobile food van at one point that was going to go to festivals. I'm sure we've all had that dream at some point. So I was coming up with all of these, almost like physical business ideas that I thought I could do. And I was working with one of the directors of a business that I used to work for on something one day, and was kind of telling him that I, wanted to work for myself and I wanted my own business. And I said, well, I just don't know what business that would be though. I can't seem to come up with an idea that, that I'm really feeling is right for me. And he said, well, have you ever considered that you might be the business? And I was like, what are you on about? And he said, well, you have this particular skill set, you have this, particular way of being, you have the values that you hold, the way that you do things, the way that you work with people. He said, I would say that combination of stuff that you have is actually pretty unique. So I was like, oh, well, it's very lovely and whatever, and kind of thought nothing of it for a while, but it planted the seed by that point. And I was like, okay. And then kind of carried on going. And then eventually this brings us up to just a few years ago now. I had become a project manager by trade, basically. I was working in consultancy, but project management was like my core skill set that I would hang everything off. And I eventually made the move to become a kind of freelance contractor as a project manager. So I'd set up my limited company as a vehicle for doing that. But that was just before COVID. So my contract that I was working on at the time came to an end because of COVID. And I guess it all just kind of, everything just sort of suddenly, finally sort of lined up for me. So I'd got the limited company, I'd got some money in the bank from doing contracting. I'd got, shed loads of spare time because we were all stuck at home, getting the lockdown tan. And so I just thought, now's the time for me to make my own business, basically. And originally, my idea had been to become something like, the kind of virtual assistant VA type businesses that you see today. And at the time, I was going to call it like a business concierge service. But the initial kind of idea that I had for that over the years since, I sort of developed my skills and grew up a bit, if you like, and was like, no, actually it's business consultancy that I do, and project consultancy. And that was what is now Optimo kind of became.
Right. Your business is improving businesses and setting up businesses and so on. But like setting up your own business, going into it, there's a whole bunch of things that you're going to be thinking of and things that you might be prioritizing. But no matter how prepared you are, you're going to hit a bunch of blind spots and, things that should be blatantly obvious to you that you miss. So how was that? And I get the impression as well, because there's a good business community in Leeds, and you're making connections into network. So that business is shaping as you sort of interact with clients and so on. What was that process like? Was it easy and steady, or was it all kind of everything at once? Like, how has it been? Have you been bouncing all over the place? Are you into a groove now? Is it always up and down? Like, what's the experience?
Yeah, always up and down is probably the short answer to that. But so I joined NatWest's Business Accelerator program, actually. So I was in the virtual cohort that started just as lockdown started, basically. So again, like I keep saying, it was luck, or that everything just sort of lined up that way. But again, it was one of those other contributing factors that meant that everything was in the right place at the right time for me to kind of start from scratch, essentially, and say, okay, what skills do I have? What experience do I have? What do I want to do? Who do I want to work with? How can I help? What does that look like? So I was able to kind of totally, blank sheet of paper and figure out what I really wanted to do and what could I do. So the program really helped me with that, because it kind of takes you through the process of understanding your mindset and how you're going to go about things. They kind of coach you through the development of your business plan and your service offer and all of that sort of stuff. So in terms of that process, that program was like completely invaluable. I think one of the other things that I did quite early on that I still kind of swear by is defining what my values were and what I wanted my values to be in relation to business, which has hugely influenced what the business is today and the type of people that we work with and the clients that we do work with, etc. So I was kind of guided along that journey by the NatWest program. However, I will say that the first 12 months for sure, and it's kind of ongoing, but it was most intense in my first 12 months. The emotional roller coaster of like, yeah, this is great. I've got this. I'm finally doing what I want to do. To what the hell do I think I'm doing? Why am I not just going to get a real job, sort of thing? And I think it was probably only partly because there were no real jobs available at the time, because everybody was stuck at home, that I had no other option. So I kind of just stuck at it, really. And I was really fortunate to have, my partner and people around me that were really supportive, and, the local Leeds business community, like you've mentioned, is really fantastic. And and I guess, I just kind of kept at it. I think it was it was a massive learning curve for me, because although, and I think a lot of people when they start a business potentially experience this, because even though you're really good at the thing that you're good at, it's not the same thing as being good at running a business that provides the services that you're good at, or, you know, that creates the product that you might be really good at making. Yeah, it's a totally different kind of ball game. But I am a bit of a learning junkie, so I was just like, yeah, the challenge is great. I loved learning about marketing. I loved even like finance, and finally being able to understand like how a business's finances worked. Like, I just kind of tried to really focus on enjoying the process and the journey, rather than just being like, I need to be successful and this is what I want, but actually understand and enjoy the journey along the way as well.
Were you able to, I mean, you know, you're saying sort of things slotting into place in the right way, in the right order kind of thing. Was that quite easy for you to sort of design how you wanted to work and how you wanted things to look? And like, were you able to take it at quite a good steady rate, or were you, I mean, how did you adjust to sort of working for yourself? Was is the tendency still to kind of work all the hours, or are you quite good at like, no, I work 9 to 5, I'm used to this, I do these hours, that's when I'm effective, or whatever it is, you know, like 7-4 or whatever.
Yeah.
But yeah, are you quite good with the routine, or was that really difficult to adjust to? You're laughing, so
I'm laughing because I'm still no good at the routine, and I'm about like 4 or 5 years in by this point. But I think the thing is, like, I've always been what I would have described as a workaholic. Like, I've always, you know, my job, my career, the thing that I've done as my 9 to 5, I've always made sure that it's like, I've always been good at what I do. So therefore I've always enjoyed it. I do have a tendency towards kind of working too hard and too much.
Mm-hmm.
And I think the danger when you do start your own company is that kind of gets worse, because now it's your own baby, and now it's the thing that, you know, you can do what you want to do. And a lot of the time it doesn't feel like work, you know. So and I think especially in the early days, when you are kind of thinking, you know, where's my money going to come from, and is this going to be the right decision to make? And, you know, you only have finite resources, so how do you know that you're focusing on the right thing, and whether that's actually going to get you a return on the investment that you're putting into it? And all of that 24/7 is definitely enough to drive you insane. But I think, again, coming back to some of the decisions that I made about what I wanted the business to be and how I wanted to run it was really important in terms of my values. So I had realised that kind of sustainability and climate action was something that I was really personally quite interested in and passionate about. And so I realised that, like, making a difference in the world was something that I knew I needed to build into the business. So I wanted to make sure that my personal kind of interest and passion for sustainability and the professional kind of skills and expertise and experience that I had was kind of brought together, basically. And that's what I've created in what Optimo is today, I think. I hope.
I'm thinking that it's like you're doing what you were doing before, but you're pulling that into that area of like, this is where we need to go. This is where my interests are. I'm going to focus on this, and I'll let you all catch up to me later.
Yeah, and that's why the tendency towards working too hard is, you know, a massive challenge for me, because now not only am I doing something that I'm really good at, but I'm also putting all of that effort into something that I really care about in terms of, you know, looking after planet and people as well. So it then really doesn't become work, because then you are kind of dedicating your life basically to something that you think can make a difference, and something that you care about, something that you enjoy learning about. And so, yeah, the lines between work and, you know, that work-life balance that people talk about, those lines are really blurred for me. But I have had experiences health-wise where I haven't been able to spot the warning signs of the consequences of that. And so why I was kind of laughing about, I still don't know where the boundaries are. Is it is like it's a forever kind of learning curve for me, is figuring out what the warning signs are and where those boundaries should be, and trying to make those boundaries a bit clearer.
I mean, obviously you're a planner,
Yeah.
but and an organizer and so on. But like, is it that thing of just getting lost, losing the time, and sort of, oh, hang on, how is it this time? I've been absorbed in this for ages. It's like all my evening's gone now.
Yeah, so I think it's a bit of that. It's a bit of, because I care so much about what I'm doing, I have a tendency to overcommit and to say yes to too many things because they sound really cool and I want to be involved in them. And then I'm like, oh, there aren't actually enough hours in the day for all of this stuff, but I don't want to, and then I don't want to let anyone down. So, I'm like, well, it's fine. I'll just keep working into the evening to make sure I get that thing done or whatever. So there's there's a few different elements to it, I think, for me, and all of those things are the things that I'm still kind of learning about myself as well.
So let's jump into COVID. I mean, I assume you work. Is it sort of you have a space to work in, or are you going to an office, or are you going to clients, or is it a mix of things?
It's a mixture. I go out to kind of networking events quite a bit. Some of our clients are local, so we might, go and spend some time on client offices or on client site. So it's really varied, and I like that variety. And I know that since COVID, I think we're all kind of figuring out what our own rhythm is again, aren't we? Both like as a collective society, but also individually. And I think it is quite, those kind of working patterns, I think they are quite personal and they are quite individual. For me, I can probably do 2 days where I'm out and about and kind of interacting with people, 3 if I absolutely have to, but then I really need, the other days to just kind of be shut at home in my spare room if I can, and ideally not really talking to anybody, although that rarely kind of works out that way. But yeah, so it's kind of probably about half and half in terms of being at home, and we try and meet up as a team as well as much as possible because we're kind of spread out across the North and the Midlands. So yeah, the variety I think is good for me.
Has the flexibility made it easier? I mean, would you have been looking to have like a bricks and mortar presence, pre-COVID? Would you have been looking to hire like office space and have people come in and work?
It's a really good question, actually, because I think for consultancy companies, that certainly the ones I ever worked for, we were always spread out across the UK. So some of us would be in an office if we were near a local office, but some of our teams, some of the consultants that I used to work with would work from home, or they would be out with clients a lot anyway. And I think for a traditional consultancy company, you would expect to have some office space that people can come to. And I think it's difficult to know, I guess, really, because the world is so different. It's difficult to know what I might have done before COVID. But like that kind of remote working style was certainly not, it was familiar to me anyway, given the kind of consultancy company environments that I grew up in. So yeah, difficult to say. But I think one of the things that we are learning is that whilst we are, entirely capable of working remotely, and the services that we provide can be mostly delivered remotely, actually, because of the type of people that we actually really value that in-person connection. And so we're still learning as a team, and especially as new people join the team, how we kind of make the most of or do whatever's best to accommodate as many of us as possible in terms of the personal preferences that we all have around that face-to-face time and the amount of that we have. So yeah, constant work in progress, I think.
Yeah, I mean it's post-COVID it seems obvious, doesn't it? But pre-COVID you might be like, we might need a presence, but it's a big overhead to take on as well, and that's that's potentially another member of staff that you could have, or whatever. So let's talk about COVID itself then, and the experience of going into that. So I'm largely looking at two things from this. So firstly, going into it, whether your work increased massively or it fell off a cliff or it just about stayed the same, and then coming out, sort of, have there been any kind of permanent changes for you, or like big changes? I mean, we've talked about hybrid working and distance working and so on, but I mean, if there's anything else, we can look at that as well. So yeah, what have been the effects for you?
So I think it's difficult for me to say kind of what the effects have been, only because obviously the business only just was born, if you like, at the beginning of COVID. So I kind of don't have like a pre, during, and post to be able to compare.
Mm-hmm.
But in terms of how COVID fits with the timeline of the business, I mentioned obviously I was working on a kind of project management contract just before COVID came along. And there were already some kind of really boring tax kind of rules that were changing in the world of contractors at the time anyway. And I think COVID just kind of compounded that, and the organisation that I was contracting for kind of went, yeah, see you later. And it didn't help that we were working on office IT infrastructure projects at the time as well. And of course, everybody closed their offices. So they just went, yeah, bye. But like I say, you know, what that did mean, because by that point I had already signed up to the NatWest programme, because I'd already decided that, you know, this might be my opportunity to kind of try and start my own thing. So actually what it meant was, because that contract ended and we were kind of stuck at home with nothing to do, it meant that I was just able to completely throw myself into developing the business and what that was going to look like. And I think the other thing that it really helped with was a lot of people who you might otherwise try and get hold of, and you would get, oh, he's in a meeting, or they're in a meeting, or whatever. That wasn't true anymore, because we were all stuck at our kitchen tables or on our, you know, laptops in the living room or whatever. So I think it made people more accessible. And I think because a lot of people were struggling with being from home, it meant that places like LinkedIn or, you know, kind of virtual networking groups, you were able to kind of get access to people and kind of access the local business community more so in those ways. So again, I'll never know, but I'm assuming that may have had some sort of impact on, you know, the way that I was able to do things and the people that I was able to get hold of to support me, etc. In terms of coming out of COVID, then I think, again, collectively as a society, we've all kind of struggled with what that means for the pace that we work at, because what we were doing was, you know, kind of 9 to 5, literally kind of on Teams or Zoom calls, whereas now we have the ability to go out and see people. So you've got to factor in travel time and things again. And I think a lot of people, I think, kind of, you know, went straight out as soon as we were able to and started having face-to-face meetings, and then suddenly realising that actually after a year of not really seeing anybody properly, or longer, or, you know, however long it was, that's actually quite exhausting. So, you know, then it became, how do you kind of regulate back to some sort of normal rhythm between doing stuff online and, you know, being out and about and seeing people in person. So, yeah, I think just the kind of getting back to a sensible kind of rhythm and pace basically has been the change since coming out of COVID.
Can you remember sort of your first client visit coming out of like going back to seeing clients in person for the first time? I mean, you don't have to remember the client. I'm just wondering if that's sort of like, it sort of creeped up on all of us, I think. We kind of, all of a sudden we were all in offices again working. It's like, hang on, was there a distinction in this time?
Yeah. And I think that's that thing again about like, you know, some people absolutely like legged it out the front door to go and see people as fast as they could. Other people were like, actually, I'm quite comfortable at home, and, you know, I don't want to have to factor in extra travel time, and why don't we just keep doing this because it's worked perfectly well for the last however long. And then other people were even further along still, where, you know, it took them even longer to come out of, you know, a self-inflicted lockdown, I suppose, because they were still really uncomfortable with, and maybe even more so than they ever would have been, uncomfortable with being around people, and especially kind of networking meetings and things. Like, that's quite an assault on the senses when all you've done is stare at your screen for however many months on end. So yeah, I think it was definitely a gradual thing for me. So I was quite happy to start going out and seeing people again, and it was really nice. I wasn't necessarily, first out the gates, but I was quite happy to kind of get some of that face-to-face interaction back. But I also, was quite like, it's really hard to ignore the benefit of not having to add an extra half an hour in for travel either side of the meeting, when actually, I could just do that meeting and then go to the next one right from my spare room.
it immediately makes you think in that mindset as well, though, doesn't it? Because I started pretty much in the pandemic as well, and like other businesses that started up. And the thing is as well, like, you started under exceptional circumstances and you're still here, so that's like that's something good. That's like something's working. But yeah, it's given this sort of, and it's the whole sort of mediating on the relationships through mediums as well. But yeah, you very much are kind of like, because with these recordings, I like to do the recordings online, but I've done some in-person ones again recently. And it's nice to meet a person in person. But it's also, there are risks involved, whether, that's germs or anything. Like, there are risks, but, the risks are reduced through doing this, and the time is reduced through doing this. But the experience, to a degree, is also reduced through doing this. I mean, like, we're getting to meet each other, but it'd be a different context in person. So, but there are so many, like, in terms of business on your time, it's kind of meeting someone in person seems like a big expense that you don't need.
Yeah, it's an expense
of time, of money getting there,
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, exactly. And I think, like, again, when you're a small business and you're just starting out, it's really difficult to the thing about, where do you focus your energy? Like, it's really difficult to know whether somebody that you're going to speak to is going to be, a kind of fruitful discussion. Are they going to have something that you need, and vice versa? Are you going to be able to help each other? Or, have you potentially just kind of wasted a travel there, a coffee, and a travel back? And it's really hard. It's really hard to kind of navigate your way through that, Whereas if it's half an hour on Zoom, then you're like, oh, well, we haven't, neither of us have gained anything, but also it was only half an hour of our lives.
Yeah.
Let's connect anyway. And then you kind of move on, sort of thing. So it is really hard. But I do know that face-to-face interaction from like a psychological point of view, for me, is always better, because the kind of additional social cues that you can pick up from it, and we are like we thrive from connection, don't we, as humans?
And the presence of the person, like feeling the presence of the person,
it's a different like energy, isn't it? So.
Yeah, and you've no idea how tall anyone is on this, do you?
You only ever see like this square of them.
Because I've met people that have been on the recording and I'm like, oh, I didn't imagine you that height. I thought you were bigger or shorter. Or...
Yeah.
Okay, so we'll do Brexit first. So during that time we Brexited. So now that we have Brexited, have you noticed any change in your work? Has it changed anything for you?
No is the short answer. So it hasn't directly changed anything. I guess the question that this sort of opened up for me was about politics more generally. So around like the Brexit thing, obviously a lot of funding and regulation and best practice kind of starts in the EU. From a business point of view, and some of those pots of funding that were available through lockdown, for example, they were kind of European funds, but also kind of linked to the markets that we work in and the types of businesses that we work with. Again, a lot of kind of regulation and a lot of best practice around like climate change, for example, is happening in countries, and a lot of innovation is happening in countries that are in the EU. So but that kind of broader question is how politics in general as well. I'm needing and wanting to learn more about. Which I never thought I would say, but again, because of, it's so intrinsically linked, is the kind of climate agenda and social change with politics, that because that's so relevant to me in my business, and I guess as I grow up as well, and more stuff is relevant to me. So I have a family to think about. I've got, I own a house that I need to think about, that sort of stuff. I need to think about how much I'm paying my employees and whether that's fair. So I think there's just more stuff now where I'm like, I need to understand what's going on as a minimum. But in terms of Brexit specifically, nothing kind of massive and direct.
I think that's a really interesting point that you bring up, and actually go directly to the politics of it and how that can affect the work. I mean, that's the whole point of the question. And a lot of the time, even still, when I'm phrasing it through work, the tendency is to go to your kind of my particular perspective sort of thing. But yeah, about not being interested in politics as well. I think there's two types of politics. There's real politics, power, and then there's the theatre that they do in the media.
Yeah.
So yeah, and I think it's that once you realise how power affects things, you're like, oh, I need to pay attention to this.
Yeah, exactly. And I wish that more people could see those links, because I couldn't for ages. And I think it can be so unnecessarily complicated as well. And the way that some people talk about politics, you immediately just go, oh my God, this is so boring, I'm not going to bother. But actually, there's an Instagram page called Simple Politics that was kind of giving us updates through lockdown about what was going on, and I think their goal is to try and simplify what's going on in politics and kind of communicate those messages out to the masses, so that more people can kind of be more in touch with what's happening. And the guy that runs it has written a book or two, I want to say, and I've read one of them and I'm just about to start the second one. And I found that really helpful as a starting point, because it is just kind of really simple language. And it gave me a bit of a kind of starting point to kind of go and look into different things and research different things. And I realised that I had already been becoming more interested in politics than I'd realised. But that was just a really good kind of A to Z way of some things to think about and some places to start in terms of what you might want to look at next, sort of thing. So I found that really helpful.
It's making me think. So I've listened to two kind of Novara media podcasts recently that were really good. Both of them, strangely enough, were interviewing city traders. One of them is a trader who he's all about inequality, and he's like, everything's just going to get worse forever because they've got all the power, and so they can game the system. We need to wake up to this. And then the other guy is like, we really need to pay attention to a lot of other things that are happening that we're not really seeing in our news, because our news is showing us nonsense. It's the fact that the Houthis were able to stop tankers, do a naval blockade without a navy, is a first in history, and we need to pay attention to things like that, because that's changed the entire game now. And you're like, oh. But yeah, and again, he's saying the thing of politics affects things. I mean, the FT have people in these areas for reasons. You need to know what's happening on the ground, in markets, and what the situation is, and they do have an effect on your business depending on where you operate. Anywhere you operate, because like we saw with Brexit, even if you're it doesn't really affect me, it could still potentially affect you. So I'll move us on, unless you want to jump in and reply to anything that I said there.
That's good.
Yeah, I thought I'd give you the right to reply. So yeah, let's do. I don't know which way around to do it, so I'm going to let you choose. Which would you rather do first, climate change or social media?
Let's do climate change.
Okay. So how does it affect your work? I'll just keep it simple this time, because I think there's going to be a big answer for this.
So where do I start? So I'm going to go right back to the beginning. And where this kind of started for me. And some people will have heard this before because it's kind of a story, I guess, that I've told a few times in terms of where the business came from in the first place.
Mm-hmm.
So I did a bit of backpacking when I was in my 20s. I did the kind of round the world, in inverted commas, not really round the world, but you kind of go Thailand, Cambodia, Vietnam, and then you go to Australia and New Zealand for a bit. So I did that.
Mm-hmm.
And I remember, like, just in general, like, the landscapes, were just absolutely incredible in that part of the world. And we've got some on our own doorstep as well. But this was when this hit me. I remember being on a boat, basically, in Vietnam in Halong Bay. And I just remember sitting there and just, like, I still get goosebumps when I think about this now. But I just remember looking around me and just being like, oh my God, this is incredible. And I just had, like, this absolutely overwhelming, like, inner calm that I've never felt before. And I realised that was the impact that nature essentially had on me. And thinking back now to when I was younger, when I was a child, I was always, when I say outdoorsy, I don't mean like sporty and stuff like that. I mean, like, I was always outside. I remember always being very aware and very connected with, like, plants and trees and animals, and kind of aware of what was going on around me in that sense. And I think, fast forward then to this moment in my 20s where I was like, oh my God, this is just incredible. And I think it's that feeling of calm now that I understand in terms of nature, and I understand that that's part of what slows me down and what pulls me out of that, working all the hours, etc., etc. And I think when I set my business up and I did that whole, what do I want to do? How do I want to do it? I had discovered, a bit of a movement, I guess, of people who were starting to talk about the B Corporation certification, and people who were talking about using business as a force for good. I came across people who were specifically talking about sustainability, but in like a professional sense. So whether they were sustainability consultants or whether they're, I met some people who were kind of building products or services that had a specific solution to something to do with climate change and climate action. And I just knew that was what I had to get involved in. And, we've all done the David Attenborough documentary kind of reeling of, oh my God, what the hell are we doing to the planet and all of that. And I think it was just kind of all of that stuff that I went, this is finally this is how I bring it all together. This is where I bring it all together. And now it's funny because the kind of journey, bit cheesy, but the journey that I went on to kind of realise this story, or this where this had all come from for me, was actually, I realised that what we do now for our clients is, amidst the chaos of all of the operational challenges that they face, what we offer them is calm, because we sort that all out for them. We're the ones that come along and we make everything work efficiently. We make it all work as smoothly as it should. We take away the firefighting and the headaches that they have. And so it's all kind of full circle for me a little bit. And that calm is, I'm chasing the calm in my life basically now.
So it makes me think of, so there's a level at which, with climate stuff, you kind of, you're looking into the abyss and or at the eldritch horror and just going crazy. But then so I was listening to a thing recently where they were talking about, various people who had a hard time or are having a hard time with climate change and dealing with it mentally and like trying to assimilate and process all this information. And obviously it's really difficult for a lot of people, but for some people it's kind of like, it's like pre-scenario running. It's like you're sort of prepping yourself, you're sort of being more prepared, and kind of, so the thinking is that they're going to be better off. What it's making me think of there is, in your story, is like, you've done the worry and the shock. Like, it's kind of like as if it's a grieving process. It's like, I've already done these stages. I'm here. Let me help you through it.
Yeah.
You're like,
Yeah.
yes, there are things we can do. We can do these things. Yes, the big things are really difficult to do and they're frustrating, but we can do these little things and that's good and that'll make you feel better and all that kind of
Yeah.
stuff. And
Yeah.
that helps you then because you're actively engaged. You're working the problem.
Yeah. And this is what I always say is that I always try to choose hope. Like, there is a lot of despair around the climate emergency because, really obvious reasons, but we also need to move into, and how are we going to deal with it because it's happening? So instead of, burying our heads in the sand, how do we focus on doing something about it? And actually, the types of businesses that we work with Optimo are those businesses that are at the forefront of, they're pioneering solutions for how we deal with it, how we mitigate those risks, how we, adapt to the inevitable and all of that. So I guess that's where I'm able to say I do choose hope because I see that there are some really great people doing some really awesome things that are really going to make a difference because that's who we work with.
Yeah.
So I think that's why I have maybe I'm able to be a bit more optimistic because I can see that there is really a lot going on in the world to try and deal with some of those problems. But it's just a massive, it fascinates me and terrifies me all at the same time. But I just love it. I love that I'm lucky that I've been able to find my kind of purpose in terms of what I can do and the part that I can play in all of it.
Is there anything that you want to touch on in this area that you want to talk about that before we move on? Because I'm thinking about things of greenwashing or other areas or things that you can kind of either respond to or deal with or how you approach. But a lot of them I've kind of covered on various things. So I don't know if there's anything kind of particular to you that you kind of maybe that doesn't get talked about enough or something that you'd like to highlight.
So I think when people think about sustainability in the business world, I think the main thing that comes to people's minds is how to make a business more sustainable. And so you think about, there are sustainability consultants out there that will help you with your carbon footprint, or, there are social value consultants that will help you with your social change initiatives. But actually, we're kind of doing a slightly different, whether it's a side of a coin or what, but the services that we offer are not actually sustainability related. So what we do is what I sometimes describe as generic kind of operational management consultancy. So we will help to map out processes and find how to make them more efficient. We will help you choose a piece of technology that you might need to do your job, and we'll help you to implement that and embed it within the team. We'll help you to design the structure of the way that your teams work and the roles and responsibilities within that, and the way that you might implement performance management processes and help people to understand the values and help them to embody the business values. We might help to identify the progress measures that you need to use and develop some KPIs around that and figure out where you're going to get the data from. So all of that is generic operational kind of improvement stuff, regardless of the type of business. Now, there's a couple of different ways that kind of interfaces with sustainability as a topic. One of those is that there are now what I describe as sustainability sectors or markets. So a business will, at its core, be a sustainability business, or they won't. So their product or service that they offer will directly respond to a sustainability problem. So maybe one of the Sustainable Development Goals, the UN SDGs, maybe. And the way that they do things operationally may or may not be the right way of doing it or the most efficient and effective way of doing it. So that's where we come in. So what we're doing is helping a business that has a solution that the world needs, and we're helping them to be even more efficient and effective at doing that thing. So hopefully they will save the world quicker, basically. The other way that it kind of works is that there are more traditional businesses that at their core, they probably do something completely, different. So let's say they manufacture shoes, or they provide, I don't know, marketing services, for example. And where sustainability comes into this is not only does process efficiency actually also sometimes means sustainability. So especially if you think about manufacturing, if you do things in a more efficient way, you're probably also going to be using less energy, and therefore you'll be more sustainable, etc., from an environmental point of view. But also considering the things about, reducing travel, or looking at the carbon footprint of the website that you might use, or, that you've had designed. But also thinking about, we touched on it before, are you paying staff fairly? Are you supporting them with their educational needs? Are you, there's all this other stuff that could be considered, how to run your business sustainably, both from a financial point of view, but also from an environmental and social point of view. So we predominantly offer generic operational efficiency services to organisations that are squarely in a sustainability sector, but we're also starting to look at how what we do from an operational improvement and change management point of view, how that can also be applicable to more traditional businesses who want to do things in a more sustainable way. So that's the kind of just a slight differentiation that sometimes is helpful, because I think sometimes people think we are sustainability consultants, and whilst we probably know a lot about sustainability, that's actually not our specialism. So yeah, just sometimes helpful to make that differentiation.
I mean, you've mentioned values and, being values based. I'm assuming that, this aspect was built in from the beginning in the design. I mean, from what you've said, yeah. So, I mean, is that kind of, I'm not sure what I'm trying to say here, but I think that's kind of the approach to a degree for maybe new businesses, but with like older businesses, like you were saying there with being sustainable or not sustainable, it's kind of like, well, you're not really sustainable or going to be, but you can do all these things which will make you a better employer, a better corporate citizen, for want of a better expression, and a like more responsible company and so on. Like, there is still wins for you, and then these are things that, well, it's win-wins, isn't it? Things that are good for the business and good for the wider community, environment, planet, etc.
Yeah, and there's also like entire pivots that people or businesses can do in terms of the product or service that they provide as well, which is the other really important bit, that industries or organisations that have historically been a part of what is now the climate kind of problem, they are becoming a massive part of the climate solution. So if you think about transport, for example, based on the form of energy that they use, they're now becoming a big part of the solution for reducing our emissions. Or, and this is where, greenwashing comes into it, but energy companies historically, they've been using fossil fuel energy, but they've got the resources, they've got the money, they've got the kind of time and effort to be able to put into innovating and finding a way to move away from that and to create something better. And then you've kind of got everyone in between. So like the shoe manufacturer, for example, or a mattress manufacturer, or a painter and decorator we've done some work with. But, absolutely everything he does, the products he uses, the way that he does it is all really environmentally conscious. So I think there's a massive kind of sliding scale of where businesses fall with some of this stuff. But I think it's the ones that are genuine about wanting to do the right thing are the ones that we work with. And there are other organisations out there that can work on the ones that are maybe less keen.
Well, again, it's what are the outcomes that you want, and how do you want to get there? Let's move on to social media. What I want to look at here, we can discuss any part of social media that you want to touch on, but what I want to look at is how much the return on investment for you time wise. Like, is the amount of time that you put into it, does that give you the kind of returns that you want? But don't just think about posting here, think about also, like time on LinkedIn or having to chat to people and that kind of work that's not work, that can be work, which is kind of the office discussion sort of thing that's now open to the world, that someone can chime in and perhaps give you business or take it away.
So this is an interesting one. When I first started out with the business, I used LinkedIn, Instagram, and Twitter. And I mean, it took up a massive amount of time. You don't realize how much time it takes to figure out what you're gonna, what you're gonna write, what you're gonna share, how long it's gonna take you to
what tags are you
going
to use? Who are you gonna?
Yeah, and then creating the imagery to go with it, and on your Instagram, making sure that the grid looks nice and all of that. And I'm just like, oh my God, no. So I eventually realised that Instagram was not. So whilst there are a lot of organisations actually on there that are useful for us to follow in terms of the progress that they're making, it wasn't the right place for us to be investing our time and effort in curating our own Instagram profile and feed, basically. And similarly with Twitter, I kind of use it more so to follow. There are some kind of vocal thought leaders in the climate space who are quite active on Twitter, that sort of thing. There are some university kind of academics that use it quite a bit. So I use that more to follow other people than to kind of create and curate our own content. LinkedIn for us really is the place to be. I was going to say I also tried out Facebook for a bit because there were some Facebook groups that I was in, and eventually that kind of fell to the wayside as well. LinkedIn I use a lot. I'm on LinkedIn a lot. But I think that's okay because that is where our community is. That's where the people are that we want to interact with, as well as potential clients. And actually, I share quite a lot on LinkedIn, so I kind of go in peaks and troughs depending on how busy I am. But I'm quite happy to kind of share stuff on LinkedIn, and I'm always sharing pictures or what I'm up to or whatever, or what we work on. And I have had people approach me via LinkedIn messages to say, I've been reading your posts, I really like it, I think you can help us. And we have had some work through it as well, so we've actually ended up kind of winning contracts through it. So it, from a return on investment point of view, I mean, I haven't quite calculated the exact ratio, but it's certainly, been worthwhile. And even just from like a brand awareness point of view, the amount of people that I see who are like, oh, I saw your post on LinkedIn, or you're all over LinkedIn, aren't you, sort of thing. So, it's obviously working. And I quite enjoy it as well. I learn a lot from LinkedIn. There's certain people on LinkedIn that I enjoy following. I enjoy reading their content. So yeah, I think we've kind of found the one that works the best for us, I think.
Yeah, which is the advice to everyone, isn't it? Really, it's like just do one, get good at one, and then worry about the others.
Yeah, because I think you kind of go, oh, we need to be everywhere, and then it's like you actually, for us, we actually don't.
Yeah, I mean, maybe if you want to be really prepared, maybe register and have a page, but just leave it until you can use it, maybe. Okay, so let's. Do we want to say anything else on social media before I move on?
No, I don't think so.
I don't think I have any particular questions on it. I mean, can't think of anything. So let's do the change question. I mean, you spend most of your time changing other people's businesses, I assume. So if you could change any 3 things about your own work, what would you change?
I think for me, it's that thing again about you feel like you never have enough time to do all the things that you want to do. So I don't know whether it's something that I would change about my work necessarily, or whether it's more about me, or whether it's more about if I had a magic wand, then I would just have more hours in the day.
Does there need to be more yous? Is that the solution? More of me.
I mean, that sounds great for me. I don't think anybody else would really like that. But yeah, so I think maybe there's just something about like I wish I could see into the future and see which things we should really be focusing on and get better at kind of prioritizing in that respect, rather than just me running around going, oh, I want to do that and I want to do that and I want to do that. So yeah, that's one. I think a second one is don't tell anybody, but for operational management consultants, our internal operations are not what they should be. But it's just that classic, isn't it? I read something the other day where they were like, you can't read the label from inside the jar or something. So you can never do to yourself what it is you kind of do for other people. So I felt a bit better about that after that. But yeah, I think we definitely need to spend some time on kind of looking internally to make sure everything is as it should be operationally, because we are also, we're also a growing business. And one of the things that we support some clients with is when they have grown and their internal kind of processes and systems haven't quite been able to catch up, and we don't want to end up being a victim of the same. So
good.
A third one, I guess maybe just more amazing clients. Like I just love like and not for the sake of having more money or having more clients, but just like, seeing the innovation really excites me. So like I absolutely love it when I speak to somebody who runs a really cool business and I just go, oh my God, that is so cool. And I think just like I really enjoy meeting new people who are doing really amazing things. So just more of that I think would be fantastic, because that's what really kind of gets me out of bed in the morning.
So let's do the final question and then I might throw some more questions at you. So if there was a universal basic income, how do you think that might change your work, if at all?
Yeah, so I mean, the limited amount that I know about the ins and outs of it, I think the biggest thing that I think is that the way it would affect our kind of talent acquisition and workforce makeup, I guess. And that's not necessarily just a thing for my business, but I guess just like it would totally transform the way society existed in the first place, and who it might mean ended up even being able or wanting to come and work for our business in the first place, and what that journey might look like and how we might find those people. Because at the moment, so we've started by working with some of the local universities to figure out how we can create kind of graduate or internship or placement opportunities. And actually one of the members of the team currently started with me on a placement, and then I employed her part-time, and then when she finished her degree she joined full-time. Well, we put her on a digital marketing apprenticeship basically, which she's just coming to the end of. And I really enjoyed that process. I feel that it's really important for us to create opportunities for young people. But working with universities is kind of the obvious way to do that. And I just think, there are already so many barriers for so many people to even get to university in the first place. So even that doesn't feel like it's, quite not good enough. But, I feel like there's still more that we could be doing to reach young people or people from different kind of backgrounds. So yeah, I assume that it would change the availability and the diversity of the type of people that might want to come and work for us. And probably loads more things that I've not even thought of, because like I say, the world would probably just be a completely different place, wouldn't it?
Yeah. Yeah, I mean, it's one of those things where you kind of I can see that there's various social benefits that could be had. There's various problems that maybe can occur, but also that'd change everything. So
exactly.
much so I have no idea really.
Yeah, like where do you start?
I mean, should we only do it for 10 years? What about, should children grow up in that environment?
Yeah.
One where they have money, ideally, yes.
Yeah, because it also calls into like the skill level, I guess, maybe of people in society. And like, actually, if people weren't having to go to work just to earn minimum wage just so that they can put food on the table,
Yeah.
would they even be doing that job in the first place?
Yeah.
And actually, if they've got some sort of level of basic income, that's like a basic safety need that is then automatically met. And therefore, what else could, what other potential could they have?
Ideally, yeah. But the other side is it could all just be, absorbed by landlords.
Well, yes.
Yeah, so I think it's one that something that needs to be more widely known and more widely discussed, which is why I kind of include it here. So this is the part where I throw it over to you to kind of discuss anything that you'd like to talk about that we haven't talked about. I'm half tempted into getting us into all sorts of rants about climate change. But, if you're not feeling like discussing that kind of thing again on the nice sunny afternoon, then I totally understand that. So yeah, let's first of all, where can people find you? Let's do the socials.
Yeah, so LinkedIn is the easiest place to find me and probably the most likely place that I'll be hanging out. So I've got my personal page, which is obviously just Danielle Heward. We do have an Optimo page as well. Beware, there are a couple of Optimos, so make sure you're looking for the right one.
You were my top one on my search. So.
Awesome.
Your
okay.
SEO's working for me.
Oh, good. So yeah, because there are a couple of others popping up, but so the website is optimobusiness.co.uk. We are the optimizing operations for change makers is our strapline. So if you're not sure if you're on the right page, then look for that strapline. But yeah, LinkedIn is where you'll most likely find me.
Cool. So is there anything particular that you want to kind of highlight, discuss, or anything that you want to say that we haven't covered particularly?
I don't think so. I think we've covered quite a lot there.
Yeah, you do go through a lot from just those questions. So let's do a local versus global kind of question. Like, so your workforce, your employees, the company is distributed. Like, over what kind of a distribution area? Like, do you work globally, or are you trying to focus locally? And do you have different approaches for those? Because I'd assume you would have to, because I guess you're not going to see a client that works in, I don't know, Malaysia or whatever, but someone who works in Batley, you'll be like, yeah, I'll come down and see your office.
So our team are spread between West Yorkshire. We've got one team member over in Lytham St Anne's, and we've got another team member in Stoke-on-Trent. So we're kind of spread out, and I think we because we work flexibly, like we don't mind where people are working from, and actually a lot of what we do we can do remotely, we can do online. The challenge would be from a geographic point of view when a client prefers face-to-face interaction. When we're doing things like delivering team workshops for clients and stuff like that, we would always actually recommend that that's done in person because of all of the kind of good reasons that we discussed earlier in terms of that kind of social interaction. But mostly what we do, we can do online. And so the geographical spread, or in terms of the focus of clients, was never something that I necessarily actively kind of chose. Mm-hmm. But what I guess I did do was decide that in terms of starting to build my network, that felt easier for me to tackle somehow if I was doing it more locally, even though at the time we were actually all online anyway. But I don't know, somehow it just felt like, the support that was available locally through the kind of combined authority and the LEP and that sort of stuff. And I think it felt a bit more manageable by starting locally. So by default, then a lot of our clients are and have been more local. But we have also had clients who are not local, and one of our previous clients, actually, they were based entirely remotely because they had some people in Portugal, some people in Scotland. They had a team member who was in Brazil, I think, at one point.
Yeah.
And so everything they did was online, and so therefore the support that we gave was online.
Yeah.
And I think the nature of the kind of spaces that we work in is, geography agnostic. So innovations are happening everywhere to solve climate change problems. And those are the types of businesses that we want to and can support. So geography isn't necessarily a restriction for us, albeit if it was something that was more operational in terms of if they had a logistics element to what they did and we particularly needed to go and look at a warehouse to try and identify operational improvement opportunities, for example, then obviously we would need to be there physically. But otherwise, most of what we do, we can do remotely.
And these are sort of for my own interest questions kind of thing. Do you do any carbon calculation? Do you have any kind of equations in place for I don't know, the various scopes of carbon accounting, or any kind of cost benefit of okay, this is going to do this much damage, but it's going to give this much benefit? All of those things are infinitely complex and so on, but do you have any kind of guiding principles and sort of, models for that kind of thing?
No. So what we tend to do is, everything that we do with our clients is kind of bespoke and tailored every single time.
Mm-hmm.
So we have people in our network who do those sorts of things where we don't, but it's a bit like, a CRM system replacement is one that we a common one that we get asked. So as a business grows, they're either started out on a spreadsheet or something like the free version of HubSpot, and now they're actually, we kind of need to do it properly. But in that kind of example, we wouldn't always point them in the same direction of the same CRM system. We would always say, we need to establish what your needs are, and then we would consider what your options are and find the best one for you. So it's the same, I guess, with where we may get involved with the kind of sustainability element of process improvement and things like that, or data management, that sort of stuff. We would always start from scratch and go, what is it that you're actually trying to achieve? And then we'll kind of work from there and find the right solution or find the right partner for you to work with in terms of measuring those things. But we try to, although clients usually have themes in terms of the things that they're struggling with operationally, each client usually has a slightly different flavor of that challenge, certainly in the way that it's manifesting itself and the thing that it is that's actually causing them a problem on a day-to-day basis. So we try to kind of strip it right back and really explore the problem for each client afresh every single time, and then kind of create a solution from scratch based on what that version of the challenge is that they're experiencing.
So it's much more of a, rather than you parachuting in with a package of, ready-made solutions, it's more of a, hello, let's audit it, let's think about the problem, let's work through it with you. Okay.
Yeah.
Here is my selection of solutions from my many shelves that I can draw on. And to a degree, it's kind of a signposting and prescribing service as well, to a degree.
Yeah, because it depends what it is and whether or not it's something that's really operational, or whether it's and the other thing is, it might be something really specialist that they need that we don't necessarily offer in-house, and therefore we would say to them, look, we can go and get somebody and we can kind of work with you to do it, or we can just send you in their direction and you can kind of create a new relationship with them and explain to them what you need. So it really is, it's always ever so slightly different with each client. So what we try to do is just keep on top of what's going on out there in terms of new technologies that might be available, or, different ways of doing things in terms of operational efficiencies, new models that might be emerging in terms of people kind of productivity and well-being, that sort of stuff. So if we know what's going on out there, coupled with our kind of expertise and skills that we have in-house, and then kind of use all of that to understand the client's challenge and how we kind of work with them every time.
Is your mission with this, is it change the world or change what we can kind of thing, or both?
Yeah, I mean, I'd love to change the world, but I think like change what we can. I think the stars of the show are those organisations that have solutions that are really going to change the world. What we are is the backup dancers, if you like, that are kind of just making those stars shine a bit brighter by helping them to do what they do, but even better, really.
Thank you again to Danielle for being my guest. Thanks, as always, to all my guests, and thanks to you, Leeds, for being my subject. If you'd like to know more about Optimo, go to optimobusiness.co.uk. If you're working or living in an LS postcode, or if you're from Leeds and working anywhere in the world, however you are Leeds, I'd love you to be one of the 1,000 loiners to help me make working hours. Please be my guest on this podcast. It's free and you get to proof what you said before I publish. Remember, all my guests can, should they wish to, pick their episode titles, write their own show notes, intros and outros, create their own episode art, edit their own interviews or episodes. You don't have to do any of that either. You can just do the interview, give me your bio, and then proof your interview and I'll do the rest. So then, my offer to you is this. You talk to me for a couple of hours and answer my questions, and in return, you will get to have some fun, a copy of what you said, and the chance to remove anything you don't want publishing, free content marketing, free media practice, as much creative input into your episode as you want, to take part in a historic project set during a pivotal moment for our species and our nation and our city. A podcast episode with your name on it and your expertise within it. My gratitude. You don't need me to email you directly to take advantage of this offer. This offer will only benefit you. That's right. It's an opportunity that you can just take advantage of. Just like that. No test. No payment. No money down. You can even recommend it to your friends, family, or employees. Or it to them. You can email working hours at workinghourspod@western-studios.com if you would like to make a podcast series or a podcast episode or any audio content. Don't forget you can do that and support Working Hours by buying podcast or audio services from me, Western Studios Leeds. Email makemypodcast@western-studios.com. Keep listening for the end credits for further information. Okay, that's me. Work for peace and plan with kindness. Cheers, ears. Take care out there and be kind to each other, Leeds. But not to fascists.
Working Hours is produced, recorded, edited and published by Simon Treen for Western Studios Leeds Limited. The music was The Bees from Chopin's Etudes, which is in the public domain and was taken from museopen.org. Go to western-studios.com and use the contact page on the site to drop me a message about either Working Hours or about your own Leeds podcast project. Keep up to date with Working Hours and find out about the other great Leeds podcasts that Western Studios is involved with by following Western Studios Leeds on Facebook at facebook.com/western_studios_Leeds and on LinkedIn, linkedin.com/company/Western-Studios. Western Studios Leeds is available to loiners to help them realise their own podcast projects for only £30 for an hour of audio podcast work or £40 for an hour of video podcast work. Email makemypodcast@western-studios.com with details of your project and what support you want to get your Leeds podcast made. Whatever your podcast question or need, get in touch with Western Studios Leeds.